Hello and welcome to this grammar webinar. We are looking at semicolons. We have three learning aims, and the first one is how to use colons to connect ideas. Hello and welcome to this webinar. This is about semicolons, and we have three key learning aims. Firstly, how to use semicolons to connect ideas. Secondly, how to use semicolons for lists. And finally, understanding the difference between semicolons and colons. First of all, we need to understand that semicolons replace connectives. They're used to join two independent clauses together when there's a connected idea. So two separate clauses that have a link and they have a connective can be joined together by a semicolon, a little bit like blue tack, joining things together. Let me give you some examples. We knew he was guilty, but there was no evidence. We knew he was guilty, semicolon. There was no evidence. So the semicolon replaces the coordinating connective. It replaces the but. However, each side of the semicolon should be able to stand alone. Let me give you another example. My coat is tartan and yours is plain. This becomes my coat is tartan, semicolon, yours is plain. Both sides of the semicolon make sense on their own, and we've replaced the and with a semicolon. I will wash my hands, then I'll eat afterwards. I'll wash my hands, semicolon, I'll eat afterwards. The then has been replaced with a semicolon, and each of the sides of the semicolon makes sense on their own. He's always late, yet you forgive him every time. He's always late, semicolon. You forgive him every time. And finally, it was hot, so I opened the window wide. It was hot, or I was hot, semicolon, I opened the window wide. Semicolons, however, can be used with connectives, and they are connectives like however, therefore, nevertheless, meanwhile, and other complex connectives. You'll need a comma after these connectives. So, for example, the population of Shanghai is around 24 million, semicolon. However, comma, Beijing has around 22 million people. The semicolon shows that these two clauses are connected. It's comparison. The however is intensifying and emphasizing that idea of comparison. The semicolon is there, and we also have the connective however, but we also have a comma after that however. Here's another example. India is over 3 million square kilometers, semicolon. Meanwhile, comma, Pakistan is almost 800,000 square meters. Kilometers. So you can see the semicolons used to connect ideas to show that they are interrelated. There's a sense of comparison, similarity, rather than contrast. One more example. There are 110 million sheep in Australia, semicolon. Therefore, comma, Australia has even more sheep than New Zealand. The semicolon shows again the interconnectedness, comparison, contrast, and the therefore develops that idea. Finally, semicolons can be used for extended lists. So you can use semicolons where the lists are more than one word. But like any list, these lists are introduced with a colon. We traveled to 4 cities, Santa Fe, which is in New Mexico, Denver in Colorado, Las Vegas, Nevada, and finally Los Angeles in California. The semicolon separates the different items in the list. Only 3 people showed up, Tom, the tall chap from accounting, semicolon, Maria, the Spanish lady who works in sales, semicolon, and Ellie, enthusiastic worker who is doing an apprenticeship here. So you can see the semicolon again is separating the items of a list, which are not places, but people here. And the final example here is the babies were impossible to dress. They kicked off their adorable woolen booties. They wriggled mischievously out of their play suits. They giggled uncontrollably, making their mother cry with laughter. So again, it's the actions in the list that have been separated. So we're separating places, separating people, separating actions. But we need to note that these lists are more elaborate and extended than lists using commas. So can you see the difference with the lists below? List A, she had a full backpack. Books, pencils, trainers, sandwiches, and a coat. List B, she had a full backpack. Heavy exercise books for every subject. Freshly sharpened pencils, which she'd been bought for her birthday. A pair of stinky old trainers. A rolled up coat in case it rained. So we can see here, using the semicolon, the list is much more extended. So, what are the differences between semicolons and colons? Firstly, she's a really funny person. He isn't funny at all. The semicolon replaces the connective, and either side of the semicolon can stand on its own. Whereas this one, she's a really funny person, especially in meetings. The other side of the colon cannot stand alone. Secondly, semicolon. In the winter, I watch innumerable hours of TV, semicolon. However, in the summer, I watch hardly any. You can see that these are independent clauses. They're connected. With a colon, that's one thing I don't like about winter, watching too much television. It's explaining the ideas. We can see in the third example, the semicolon is used for an extended list, whereas although the comma introduces both lists, the list on the right-hand side uses commas to separate the items because they are shorter. And then finally, a semicolon cannot introduce speech, whereas a colon introduces speech. So have a look at the recap questions. How do you use semicolons to connect ideas? How do you use semicolons in lists? And what's the difference between a colon and a semicolon? Have a go at answering these questions. Thank you for watching the webinar, and hopefully you feel more confident using semicolons. Thank you for joining me, and see you next time.